two faces of sorrow. Most people meet depression as an enemy, yet not all depression is the same. There is what I would call a hard depression, and there's the tender ache. Hard depression is the ego's rebellion against things that change. It's much louder, angular, impatient. It wants answers, and when none appear, it becomes bitter. The ego uses resentment to stay alive because anger gives it the illusion of strength. Underneath that anger lies terror. It's the fear of losing control, of being nobody. So the ego fights. It blames, it judges, it resists, and it clings to its old familiar narratives. And it says, well, if I stay angry, at least I can still exist. But that kind of existence inevitably burns the heart. You can see this in the faces of people whose pain has turned sharp. Sarcasm replaces their sadness, and bitterness becomes a defense against feeling. The inner voice keeps rewriting the story, trying to prove who was wrong and who was right. And think this is the mind's attempt to escape the body's cries for stillness. Hard depression is not weakness, it's a survival reflex. The system becomes overloaded and has not yet learned how to yield. Soft depression, or the tender ache, is different. It arrives when resistance tires of its own noise. It's not a collapse. It's a surrender of control. So instead of saying, how do I fix this? The tender ache may whisper, what if I stop fighting? At first it feels like a defeat, but soon you notice something subtle. In that quiet ache, there is honesty. There's no pretending, no masks. It's just breath, sensation, and truth. The tender ache is the nervous system's way of recalibrating. And when the old stories crumble and no new ones have yet formed, the psyche rests in this gray twilight. Yes, it feels like melancholy, but it is safe. It's the body's trusting that silence can hold what words never could. This is where the soul learns humility. It discovers that peace isn't pleasure. It's a kind of permission. In this state, the ego loses its grip on identity. It no longer demands to be admired or understood or even redeemed. The heart becomes undefended, and the energy, once bound in resentment, becomes compassion. This is why this form of sorrow feels strangely sacred. It's grief purified of pride. The tender ache doesn't ask for resolution, it asks for presence. It teaches you to move slower, to listen deeper, and to honor the pace of healing. It is the same intelligence that turns autumn leaves into compost, winter's cold into fertile spring. Nothing is wasted when it's met without resistance. When you live from this tenderness, relationships will also change. You no longer demand that others be the one to complete your story. Instead, you meet them as fellow travelers in the valley of impermanence. You can love without clinging, and you can release without regret. And even solitude becomes companionship because the ache itself feels alive, like a quiet friend sitting beside you in the stillness. On the other hand, hard depression isolates you, but the tender ache unites. The difference here lies in surrendering. Whether the pain is used to build walls or to open the window, the first breeds bitterness, and the second becomes beauty. So, if you find yourself heavy, quiet, slower than before, you don't need to rush to escape. You may in fact be standing on sacred ground. The tender ache is not a flaw to be cured. It's the soul's way of remembering its depth. And when the ego's voice fades, what remains is a silence that's vast enough to hold every heartbreak. And within that silence, you discover a gentleness that never leaves you. The tender ache. It lives just beneath the breath. Not sorrow, not peace, but the hush between them. Once I called it loneliness, then loss, then something to escape. Now it is simply the pulse of what remains when striving ends. It does not ask to heal. It only asks to be felt. The way dusk holds both light and memory. The way the ocean holds the shape of every wind. In its warmth, I remember how fragile the heart was meant to be, how every crack lets in a little mercy. The tender ache, not wound, not wonder, but the quiet proof that I am still alive and unafraid to feel.